there's a sense of urgency because maybe we feel lonely or we feel like, oh,
Mm.
my friend just got engaged and like,
Yeah.
or they're married, or, like you see a lot of the comparison. And so I think when
Yes.
we're in like a place of kind of scarcity or like urgency and we stay in that and keep
Mm.
taking, like, I need to do more and more and more, I think that can definitely cause burnout.
Welcome to Sensitive Stories. This episode is for educational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for treatment with a mental health or medical professional. Let's dive in. So, Rebecca, could you start off by telling us your HSP discovery story? How and when do you remember realizing that you're highly sensitive?
So I have gone on and off since I was probably a little kid, like 4, to play therapists, different therapists. And I think that probably like around, I'm not sure, maybe like 10 years old, one of the therapists that it was kind of like a family therapist gave my mom the book that, like, I think Rebecca's highly sensitive. So she
Wow.
gave her that book to read. Um, and then we didn't really like talk that much about it. But then I remember in college, like finding the book and she's like, oh yeah, this woman, like Kathy, she gave it to read about you. And then I read a little more about it. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I had always kind of felt sensitive and like more in like
Yes.
curious about people's emotions. And um yeah, I kind of started diving a little bit more, I guess, around in college. And then when I kind of
Mm-hmm.
re found that book into more like intuitive
Mm-hmm.
healing, and Reiki healing, and
Mm-hmm.
just kind of a more holistic practice. And yeah, and I was minoring in art, and so just kind of reading about the
Yeah.
book and like the different strengths and then the
Mm-hmm.
things that like could be overstimulating, or yeah, it just resonated. And then yeah, I've sort of like, picked it back up and come back, and but it
Mm-hmm.
definitely really resonated. And then I had also, which I know is a little bit different, but read some of Judith Orloff's like
Mm-hmm.
empath stuff.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I know they're like different, but there's some of the things and the ways of like understanding yourself and tuning into your nervous system and like
Yes.
the gifts that come with it when you have things organized to like
Uh-huh.
be um yeah, like I don't know the word, I'm losing the word that I'm looking for, but like supportive in like a place
Yeah.
that you really can thrive. So it's been like a process. And
Yeah.
then also moving into being a therapist and kind of figuring out that direction with being a more sensitive person as a therapist. Um, yeah. So
Yeah, it's
I
such
guess
a
it was
journey, isn't it?
organic. Yeah.
I love that it was introduced early on. You're the first person I've talked to on the podcast that their parents actually knew about the trait in Elaine's book early on,
Oh.
which is so fascinating that most people say like, I knew there's something different about me, but not knowing quite what it was. And how interesting that seed was planted early on. But it sounds like
Mm.
did do you find that it showed up during your childhood? Like, did it inform how your mom or your family looked at you or treated your sensitivity?
Well, I mean, I think it met just with like my mom was a little anxious. I
Mm-hmm.
think she was a single mom, and
Mm-hmm.
like I think more didn't always know how to help me with like soothing and like temper
Yeah.
tantrums and those kind of things. And
Right.
um yeah, I think like the now as a parent to a toddler that has tantrums and like just kind of understanding dysregulation and the nervous
Yeah.
system, and it all kind of makes sense with being
Mm-hmm.
overstimulated. And yeah, um so I guess maybe sensitive in that way, but also I was kind of reading some of the strengths about it
Mm-hmm.
as I got older. I was sort of told like kind of like a high EQ, or like having
Mm-hmm.
conversations with adults as like a little kid and just like being
Yeah.
very like empathic and things like that, and just very interested like in
Mm.
people and stories. So, and I always like doing art and like creative things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just interesting. So I don't know. I guess I probably did feel sensitive a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe I was told that, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You said you were kind of drawn to people's emotions and you had this rich inner life, which I love. It's such a therapist.
But
Uh,
probably also, yeah, it's interesting.
hmm.
Like looking back.
Yeah. Yeah. What's interesting about it for you when you think about those early years?
Yeah, I guess I wasn't the way I'm describing it now, I didn't
Hmm.
have the language
Right.
or sort of the insight to understand that then.
Exactly. Yeah. This is, I think, true for a lot of us. When we finally have the language, there's so much to make sense of. When you look
Yeah.
back, and and you said, you really resonated with Judith Orloff's work and being empathic and maybe picking up on things in people's experiences that maybe other kids didn't or family members didn't, and just having this, yeah, this very distinct experience around your sensitivity. Yeah, very rich. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. I guess it's now I look at it that way, but I don't know that I looked at it as much.
Yeah.
Like in the moment I was kind of anxious or like not fully understanding certain things. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I when I look back for myself too, I, I don't remember thinking, "Oh, I'm sensitive" when I was a kid. Definitely,
Right.
yeah, it's interesting because I don't remember thinking that. Definitely had some kind of big feelings and I was really curious and perceptive.
Mm.
But I never thought of myself as sensitive. Didn't really have that language at all. Um, so yeah, now there's a lot of kind of re-understanding those earlier experiences when I look back. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of integrating it with like, okay, I
Exactly.
understand this now. This is what
Yep,
was that understood then, and like I can hold space for both. Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, exactly. And as you got older and started forming relationships with folks, and how did your sensitivity or how did being more sensitive impact those experiences as you got older?
Um, it's interesting. High school and middle school, I feel like are a harder time for social relationships. I just think about
Yes.
it now. I'm reflecting back a lot on that, like my inner
Yes.
teen, and I think I may like engaging, like I'm able to kind of like talk to people,
Mm-hmm.
most people easily, but definitely I had experienced some of those when people like kind of small talk being draining or people that were just now I realize it's like, oh, they're
Yes.
just maybe not so deep or like we just
Mm-hmm.
don't connect on that. Yeah, and having that experience of sort of this like misattunement.
Yes.
And then certain friendships of like being really close and like
Mm.
having like deep conversations. I think yeah, in terms of romantic relationships, I feel like at crushes, like when I definitely would have kind of a lot of fancy. I mean, that's like I talk
Mm-hmm.
about it now, which is how that can happen. Um, and so I think, it's like that evolution versus like more of like when I was a young woman, like dating
Mm-hmm.
and understanding kind of like now what I see is like dating burnout and why it's better to
Yes.
be like intentional and tune into
Mm-hmm.
yourself and understand your needs and like less is more and that kind of thing.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I know that was kind of a longer
No,
answer.
this is helpful because you're highlighting a lot of, I think, the struggles HSPs go through when they're forming any relationship. Wanting deep, meaningful relationships, not always being able to
Mm,
get them, not just relationships, but friendships too. But then often, a lot of times feeling disappointed or unfulfilled, right? Like not being able to
yeah.
find those close
But then
connections.
you have them, but I think sometimes I would experience, yeah, like more sensitive to rejection, I guess, or feeling like left
Yes.
out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, but I did find even as like a teenager or kid, I would be friendly with like a handful of people, but I tended to have more like just like a few close friends that I would be like
Yes.
engaging with more. And so just kind of understanding that now. And it's interesting even I feel like now at the time of my life and just how my friendships and the quality of that
Mm-hmm.
just seems so much more kind of I don't know, just aligned and like
Yeah.
the things that really matter. So it's yeah, kind of looking at it through like the HSP lens, I
Mm-hmm.
think is interesting for me.
Yeah, it is. And you mentioned just having a lot of different being able to connect with a lot of different types of people. That's definitely been my experience, which always surprises me. I can kind of connect with
People would
anybody.
tell me a lot. Like I
Yeah.
remember going to college and that I feel like I went to a place New Paltz that's in upstate New York, but like
Oh
Hudson
yeah.
Valley. I'm
Mm-hmm.
originally from Oneonta, and then I went New Paltz is like a little bit closer to New York City. Now I'm in
Mm.
New York City, but yeah, and suddenly kind of it was like a lot more people, and there was like, oh, there's some people that I don't connect with, but there's a lot more people. But I
Mm-hmm.
remember people disclosing to me like a lot of things, like, and you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, and then just kind of reading more about like empaths, HSPs, and that
Mm-hmm.
it kind of happens to them.
Right, where
And
people
being
just feel safe.
mindful, yeah, of like how much you're holding or taking on. And I definitely have read a lot of the, I don't know, like Melody Beattie, codependency
Mm-hmm.
kind of things that, yeah, because it's like such a delicate balance of like holding
Yeah.
space, being empathic, but then not like
Right.
yeah, taking everything on or kind of, yeah, getting drained or
Mm-hmm.
maybe, using it as a way to feel like in control or whatever.
Mm. What do you, I want to, if you're open to it, hear more about that. How does the
Well,
control piece come in? I'm curious.
I guess it's not in like a way of really manipulative, but I
Mm-hmm.
think with kind of more rejection sensitivity or like being a little sensitive to abandonment or things
Yeah.
like that. And then feeling like, oh, I'm very like nurturing and I can help
Right.
people using it as a way to be like, oh, like they're gonna wanna like I don't
Right.
know, like a less vulnerable way to bond, which it's like
Sure.
now that's something that's not fulfilling, because it feels
Right.
like it's not reciprocal. But yeah, I guess I don't know if
Yeah.
that's an HSP trait, but just sometimes people see that in you and they're like, oh wow, you really
Right.
understand me. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if this is true, but I wonder if it's a way that we get value and then leaning
Mm,
kind of too much into this is something I've definitely done where it's like, oh, I can be empathetic, I can be caring, I can really see people, I can take care of their emotions. And then but then I can maybe over identify with that and
exactly.
nothing is coming back in return. But it
Right.
is safer in some at some 'cause it's less vulnerable.
And that's I think more, yeah, kind of, younger like parts or like
Mm-hmm.
more being in a more survival mode. But yeah, as you
Yeah.
begin to kind of embrace and understand it, it's like, oh, that doesn't actually feel good and I don't need that.
Right, exactly. Right, you need something to come back and feel that support.
Yeah.
Yeah, some reciprocity. Yeah. What do we do if we find ourselves stuck in those relationships or maybe in that pattern of
Mm,
I'm always the giver? How do we kind
yeah.
of right the balance there?
Well, and I think actually like in dating,
Yeah.
with a lot of the women I work with,
Hmm.
especially kind of New York City, like there's a lot of like very successful professionally
Yeah.
successful, in all, most ways, like very driven, like
Hmm.
also kind of a little sensitive and anxious,
Yeah.
but a little afraid to be vulnerable.
Hmm.
Sometimes with dating, I see this. And wanting to like almost be like hyper independent or control things or like predict every single outcome or like,
Right.
have um, and I think it's a balance of being able to
Yeah.
find some softness and
Mm,
vulnerability while also, like,
yes. Yeah,
yeah.
welcoming in some softness and letting yourself be cared for sometimes.
Even if you
Yeah.
can do it yourself, but like, all, yeah, when asking
Yeah.
for help and
Hmm.
yeah.
Do you see that when you're helping clients in the dating process that they often are the ones doing a lot of the emotional labor in the relationships or giving maybe more than they're receiving, getting stuck in that role?
Yeah. I mean,
Hmm.
it depends. I guess I would say on like sort of what stage they're at, like if they're
Mm.
in a relationship versus if they are kind of going on dates as single and like, but yeah, definitely see women that there's like it's a little scary to be vulnerable or
Mm.
wanting to kind of control a lot of
Yeah.
aspects or, wanting being vulnerable and then kind of feeling like nervous about it afterwards or yeah, I'm yeah, I mean you see it's like I think and I tell people when they're very anxious about meeting
Hmm.
someone they haven't met someone yet, that like It doesn't end once you meet the person. Like all the stuff is going to come up too. Like it's kind of like a mirror. So being able
Yes.
to be in tune with that, understand what's your stuff, what's theirs, how do I communicate it?
Mm-hmm.
Where are differences in what we need? And, even if you're dating another HSP, like you
Mm-hmm.
might not always have the same needs at the same time or exactly the same preferences.
That's true. That's really a good reminder that even two HSPs are going to have differences to work through and might be going at different paces. Yeah, such a good
Yeah.
reminder. Yeah. You mentioned earlier about burnout, and the first
Mm-hmm.
time I really heard about, I mentioned we talked a bit about this already off the recording, but just how burnout can also show up in dating, which we only hear about
Yeah.
burnout in work, right? Could you say more about that experience of burnout in dating?
Well, it's interesting because um I guess I got interested in like mindfulness and burnout after kind of working in an agency,
Mm,
transitioning into private practice, but also seeing how you could still be burnt out in the
yeah.
private practice.
Yes.
Um, and so I also do like I'm a teacher, like a speaker for like
Mm,
PE lectures on burnout and the helping profession. And so just kind of noticing some of the as I like had created that before I really niched onto dating, I
hmm
saw a lot of overlap in some of the things that I had been through. I mean,
hmm
it's been a bit of time since I was like in that dating world, but like initially what I was doing and then like seeing what wasn't working and then kind of things that I shifted and then seeing clients coming in when they were sort of in this place of like just misalignment and not really, in like
Yeah.
intentional versus the ones that were.
hmm
Um, yeah, and so I was like, "Oh, okay, like it's pretty similar." And some of the strategies that you would use to help are also
hmm
kind of similar too. And just sort of this interconnection of everything. And also sometimes how we could hide, but I guess the difference sometimes like hiding behind work professionally. Like you can, I don't know, I feel like the personal and professional, it's like we want to have boundaries, but they also like affect one another.
hmm Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I mean, these two they easily overlap, right? The things that you're seeing
Hmm.
in dating versus work, putting so much into it. If let's say in the dating process, what would lead me to burnout in that? What are some of the things that you see? Like, what am I doing that could make me feel burned out at in my dating life versus work?
So specifically for HSPs,
Or anyone really. I'm just, yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
okay. So I guess I was saying that to clarify because I
Mm-hmm.
think I would say like when you're going on like way too many dates and it's
Mm-hmm.
not with people that are aligned, like if they're not, it's not a good
Yes.
fit.
Yeah.
Whether that means like, they don't have the same like values or like a vision for the what
Mm.
they want.
Mm-hmm.
Or, they're just kind of like it's just not like personality wise, like or it's like
Yeah.
uncomfortable, like you don't really want to be there, but you went and you feel bad,
Mm.
like some of that stuff. um, but sometimes I have found definitely for HSPs and kind of more like introverted, I definitely say like just less is more. But there are some people maybe that are a little bit more extroverted that sometimes if they're a little anxious, like
Mm-hmm.
socially in terms of
Mm-hmm.
going out, sometimes just like going out on a few dates to kind of like get things moving can be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's again, it's like tuning into yourself though and sort of knowing. But I definitely think going out with people just because like I like throwing spaghetti at the wall when you don't
Yes.
actually really know what you value or what you need, what your
Yeah.
needs are, what worked in the last relationship, what didn't,
Mm-hmm.
what are maybe like kind of blind spot when
Yes.
people are, or there's a sense of urgency because maybe we feel lonely or we feel like, oh,
Mm.
my friend just got engaged and like,
Yeah.
or they're married, or, like you see a lot of the comparison. And so I think when
Yes.
we're in like a place of kind of scarcity or like urgency and we stay in that and keep
Mm.
taking, like, I need to do more and more and more, I think that can definitely cause burnout.
Sure, especially if you see others around you meeting milestones in relationship, either starting a relationship, getting married, maybe having kids, and then chronically maybe feeling like you're behind. I work with a lot of
Yeah,
clients
the
that are in that space.
isolation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that urgency amps way up. It's like, well, and then we're maybe pushing ourselves beyond our capacity for dating.
And also I think I use a lot of I mean I'm integrative, I think as you are
Mm-hmm.
too from
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
but stuff around kind of like nervous system regulation and then also like
Mm.
secure attachment, like healing
Yes.
attachment. And, it's like when we're in a place where we're burnt out and anxious and we go on a date, we're not gonna, we're not really like safe in a place where we're safe and connected to
Yeah.
really, openly connect or show up authentically or feel like comfortable. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's true. Maybe you need to do some grounding, some regulating first, so you can be clear-headed enough to think, how am I feeling? How am I connecting with this person? Or my,
Exactly, in the
yeah, right.
moment. And also ahead
Yeah.
of time, I think, I definitely like meeting at a place that like also works for you. Like not
Mm.
like if you have a super long day and like it's one thing if you're like you've been seeing someone and it's like you're really excited, but like when you're
Right.
kind of meeting on first dates and it's like that's not really convenient for me, but like I guess I'll go or like that's
Mm.
far. I don't really, but like I personally like I'm just like, oh, okay, I'll pick a place right near me. If it's not good, then I give myself a timeline. Like and kind of I
Oh,
when I
yeah.
started kind of doing that, I felt more like, okay, well, I went. And then I think also sometimes, like, again, like that quality over quantity, like really tuning into
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, well, what is it that they actually need? Like, what are my
Mm.
needs in a relationship? What are like arbitrary things that are more, it's like based on an image that like you don't,
Mm.
it maybe it doesn't, like, is that really gonna be a trait that meets a need of yours? Or it's just sort of a status about like how it'll look externally or something that
Yeah.
I
Mm.
mean, but it's good to have like our own standards, but I kind of
Absolutely.
like encourage people to look within and think about that and to be confident in knowing that. And also like
Mm-hmm.
ahead of time. I mean, it sounds, I think often people are, I recommend like do a call with somebody before you meet them. Do it like if you can, like vet people because less is
Yes.
more. And I think people get into like, oh, I'm gonna miss out. And I kind of, and this is where I think like the spirituality and letting go piece is, I
Mm.
find releasing that expectation and like attachment to the outcome to kind of be like, okay, but like you're being intentional about it. So like you're just filtering it out. If it doesn't work out, like, okay,
Mm.
like you're just getting closer to the next one. And kind of when you're in that place of alignment, it just comes. I mean, I know
Right.
people don't always
Yes.
like to hear that, but I think, and so it's the more we tune
Yeah.
into our, knowing, like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, just I really enjoyed all of the stuff I've seen with your work of kind of even just
Thank
knowing your
you.
schedule or when you need a pause or when you need a
Mm-hmm.
moment to regulate, or maybe you need time to yourself, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be too much for you, or like, and like
Yeah.
putting yourself into a place where you're like first filled up and regulated and then going out dating or even showing up in a relationship. Like I tell
Mm-hmm.
people, you don't throw these skills out the window like once you're in a relationship. You still have to be filling up
Right.
your cup, regulating your nervous
Yes.
system, communicating your needs. Like,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, everything you're saying really resonates because you need to take care and consider your nervous system, your needs in the equation of dating. And I love that you're saying like familiarize yourself with where you're going. Pick somewhere that's close. Maybe that'll help minimize any anxiety or energy that it takes to go on these dates. If you can save some of that bandwidth, and then yeah, giving yourself time to process, vet these people. It's okay to say no. It's okay to trust your gut if something's not
Hmm.
feeling a good fit. You don't have to like just date arbitrarily just to meet a certain threshold or something like that.
Yeah. And I think that also the same goes with, it's definitely good to have some outside guidance, but I
Mm-hmm.
think it's like being more intentional with
Mm.
like not asking a million different people because that can also kind of cause some burnout or like
Sure.
confusion.
Mm-hmm.
So people that you trust, like you respect, they understand you, they like you're able to have
Yeah.
conversations. I think
Mm-hmm.
that helps too.
Yeah, just having a
Um,
support system throughout the process.
yeah. And yeah, and I mean in my practice we also do like some dating groups.
Oh, amazing.
like group therapy, kind of
Mm-hmm.
psychoeducation, because I have found that also, like you're saying, the feeling of isolation, people can feel a lot. And so if you're like, I just need to meet someone because everyone else has someone, you can also start to like,
Yeah.
you're not really tuned into what you actually need.
Mm-hmm. Right. So just coming back to yourself.
And
What are
having
my
like
needs and
other people
values?
that are like minded, they have the same
Yes.
intention, they get it. Like you feel like,
Right.
okay. I definitely found for myself having at least like a few supportive, like platonic friends that like it safe relationships and we could support each other made a difference.
Mm-hmm. Could you say a little bit more about what does that look like? Is that checking in before or after dates? Is that
Mm.
getting advice? What does that look like?
Um, yeah, I guess a bit of both.
Yeah.
And also kind of like knowing that having people to do things with outside of just dating
Mm-hmm.
and like feeling
Mm-hmm.
supported. Yeah, feeling like encouraging each other,
Mm-hmm.
kind of looking out for each other. That just, I feel like that was helpful for me personally.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen with my clients, which is why I created the dating groups, was the ones that had more like positive friends, not aligned, I guess, like in
Sure.
the same page as what, and felt like support. It was a lot easier to feel relaxed kind of about
Mm-hmm.
dating versus people that felt like they were all alone and that feeling of
Sure.
loneliness
Mm.
and then that like urgency I have to meet someone. I think it was harder.
Right, right. Where if you have friends in your corner, there it kind of softens that urgency.
Yeah, like some kind of
Yeah.
community.
Right. Yeah. How amazing that you're doing groups. I mean, that is such a good support. Like we all
Yeah,
need that.
it's fun for me too. I ran a lot of groups when I worked in addiction treatment, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it's something a little different about group energy.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, is that something you only offer for folks that are in New York, or is it something that
So,
is
well, we
online?
have like psychoeducation
Mm.
ones that are more general to people out of state, and then
Mm-hmm.
I'm also licensed in Florida, and my associate is
Okay.
New York and New Jersey.
Oh,
So
perfect.
for like the more process groups, it's people in state, but then we have like psychoeducation where
Nice.
it's like workshops and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Oh, beautiful.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, I love
So it's
that.
been fun, yeah. And it's really nice. Like I think also kind of the synchronicities that you see, just like I don't know, the synergy and
Yes.
things that you see in a group is
Mm-hmm.
inspiring.
It really is. Yeah, you tend to see your own experience show up when you're in community. Yeah,
Yeah.
love that. So I have a listener question for you if you're open to
Yeah.
it. So this is about once you're in relationship, and this person says, relationships are so important, as we both know, but the time
Hmm.
and the energy needed to sustain them can be really overwhelming. When you're dealing with life, friendships, family, how do we find the energy to maintain these romantic relationships or build a relationship if you're in the dating process when you're more sensitive and maybe have less capacity? How do we find the time and energy for a relationship?
That's a really good question. It
Yeah.
sounds like a very reflective,
Yes, I thought so.
self-reflective. So I think it's definitely tuning into when you're depleted and
Mm.
still filling up your own cup and recognizing that the relationship, like your, partner's not going to be able to fill every single
Mm.
role for you.
Hmm.
Some stuff is you have to take care of. Some stuff might be a friend or like going to a yoga class or something else. And then, um, I think kind of being intentional about making time to connect, but also recognizing whether or not, your partner is highly sensitive or like, and not, but kind of talking about like, hey, like
Okay.
these are things that sometimes I need a little more time or like
Yeah.
I was a little too like more social, like just communicating, I think our expectations and needs and having an
Yes.
open dialogue with both people um
So
makes all the
important, isn't it?
difference. Yeah. And then also thinking about like, okay, kind of almost, I think like almost like buckets of things that you're like, all right, like this is a little like my alone time or like my self-care or like my sleep or like that's a little like I maybe need to try to that's I'm running at a deficit right now. Or kind of like, maybe I need to put a little time like into like I don't know, even I think for myself, it's like different stages of life. You have
Mm-hmm.
different things. Like, okay, like maybe like we need to like schedule a babysitter for this date night. Like, okay, like maybe we should like let's like put our phones away for this dinner, this
Mm-hmm.
show, like certain things, like being intentional about it because I
Yeah.
think life is overstimulating and
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming, and there's a lot of stuff that we have. So
Yeah.
finding that time to be able to ground, and
Yeah.
we've been doing some things like together that are
Yeah.
grounding. Yeah, but I think paying attention if you feel depleted, like maybe it's just
Mm.
also thinking about um you maybe what can we kind of simplify or clear out a little that's not as essential, that
Mm-hmm.
might be causing like an energy drain, sort of.
Yeah, right. Just looking at what do we need to either sustain ourselves or come back together in
And
relationship.
also like going back to sort of what are the do we have it when do both people have like a shared vision and kind of like
Mm.
shared expectations of the relationship? Because if
Mm.
that's mismatched,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
right.
mean,
That's a big deal.
yeah.
The vision
And I
is
know people,
mismatched.
it's vulnerable, I think,
Yeah.
especially in today's dating culture.
Mm.
Sometimes to own like what you want, or like to be with the fear, like, owning people that are like, oh, I'm just looking for, I've had clients like something casual, but like then before they just told me but like, they're like, well, he said like he just wants to see. And I'm like, but you just told me you really want like a commitment or a serious relationship.
Right.
So, and so it's a fear of like, well, I don't want to get rid of what I have because then I'd really be
Mm-hmm.
alone and there's not really anyone left.
Right.
Or sometimes maybe somebody's like they do like the person, but it's moving a little. Like if there's a little, maybe it feels like there's like, false intimacy building or a lot of like texting up front before you've really
Mm-hmm.
met, or a little like kind of love bombing. Not that it's always bad, but sometimes we get, excited with our like
Right.
hormones and chemistry.
Sure.
And so I think sometimes like slowing it down if it does feel intense, and noticing
Yeah.
that and kind of being more in
Mm-hmm.
tune. Just,
Yes.
based on this person, I guess asking themselves, like, well, how much time do you want to put into it? Like, is this
Hmm.
a priority for you? Like kind of like exploring your own.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
great inquiry too.
and
How much do you want versus how much is expected? And what's realistic? Yeah, these are great questions. I think there is a lot of pressure to do relationships in a certain way.
I know, and
Mm.
I think it is. I mean, for whatever it's a combination of like our families, different generations, as we look at all the
Sure.
cycles of intergenerational trauma,
Yes.
different societal norms.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think also definitely today, the generation of like instant gratification, I think
Yeah.
we has kind of been absorbed a lot into the dating culture.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But I think, and in general, just the things that we see on TV and movies, like I mean, I watch all of them too. They're fun, but I think having some distinguishing that like that's a 45-minute episode or
Right.
whatever, that's like an hour and
Yeah.
a half movie. Like after they get together, like there's work that has like they don't
Right.
just live happily ever after with no
Right.
work. And and just certain things that are like, oh well, like it was, even in terms of like, sex and intimacy and some of the
Mm-hmm.
um I think expectations or things, as relationships change, or like
Right.
things are stressful or there's not times, and kind of just normalizing that things ebb
Mm-hmm.
and flow and that it's an
Yes.
ongoing thing. And
Yeah,
yeah.
it's not a fairy tale. I think you talk about this a lot, like the rom-coms or the Disney movies, where everything looks a certain perfect way, and that's not reality at all.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, I think you can have moments where you feel, like it's not just, I don't mean to say it in a way that like it's not something that's meaningful, but I think it's like
Right.
in general, kind of real life, I guess like this
Yes.
person was asking, does have like different stressors or like responsibilities, or like you're tired, or like you're not
Right.
feeling well. So I think it's also learning like how do we kind of coexist and like co-regulate and like navigate it,
Yes.
like communicate it, and
Mm-hmm.
ultimately thinking about when you're dating that I mean, depending on what goals are, because I don't, like, that's what I always tell
Sure.
people, clarify your own goal. Like, if somebody wants something casual or like conventional non-monogamy or like, I mean, it really depends. My population I'm working with is more like monogamous commitment. So, but again, like it's like some people want kids, some people don't, some people could go either way. And like even those kind of things, it
Right.
can definitely, if you're not aligned with it. So
Mm-hmm.
I think just clarifying for yourself is important too. And then thinking about like, okay, well, this is like a long-term thing. I'm also going to want to prioritize traits of like in 50, 60 years, like someone who
Right.
communicates well, someone who's thoughtful, someone who
Yes.
can listen, someone who's like, doesn't have a short fuse or,
Yeah,
um,
that's a great inquiry. What type of person I would spend the next multiple decades of my life with, and what would be a fit for me?
and I guess it's hot, it sounds almost like I feel like I don't, that's what I'm saying. It's like for whatever works for each person. It's not that I
Yeah.
force that on anyone, but I think if
Right.
a lot of people are saying that they're seeing this in movies, but they're not almost like kind of registering, like, oh,
Right. Right, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, the different pieces of the puzzle. Yeah, as we get closer to wrapping up, I'm wondering if there's anything we've left out that feels important to know for to share with folks that are listening about dating and relationships as a sensitive person.
I think remembering because even I think my husband is like a relatively more sensitive. Like I made him read the HSP book,
Hmm.
the Judith Orr, like, but we're also different and like we have sometimes different preferences on what we want, or some might be similar, but we might want alone time at different times, or
Sure.
he might want affectionate time when I don't, or like vice versa. And I think, obviously we're like aligned, but I
Sure.
found um or maybe one person is triggered by something, but
Hmm.
or like it's not discussed, and that kind of I think sometimes being nervous to speak our needs, or this illusion of like our partner should know but they
Mm.
don't know. And so I
Hmm.
think just kind of tuning in, learning about your traits and kind of what you need. Like even I'm like, can we turn off these overhead lights? Like he's
Yes.
not as sensitive to them. He's like, it's dark. And I'm like, I just need a little of the overhead lights, or like I'm overstimulated right now. Like, can I,
Yes.
because everyone's different, even if so that's why I think it's just communicating it. And,
Yeah.
again, like bringing in like attachment, which styles I
Hmm.
really feel are kind of fluid personally.
Hmm.
Like, but being even like, oh, like kind of, I feel nervous if I don't hear from you all day, even though like, I
Right.
have my friend, it's like, my husband's always like, he never texts, but he hates texting. He doesn't like to really be on
Right.
the phone. So like, he's
Hmm.
not always paying attention, but it's like the kind of her being like, but I feel anxious not hearing from you. So could you
Yes.
let me know you're not going to be on? Like just communicating
Right.
things like that. And then
Hmm.
knowing for ourselves when it's like, okay, like I'm irritated, like I need to go exercise. I need a little can I have
Yep.
like 5 minutes alone? I think
Hmm.
that not expecting someone to read your mind.
Yeah, we do, I
Yeah.
think, though, because we are very perceptive as HSPs, and I think a lot of times we want or
Mm,
we hope that other people will do the same. But right, even when you have two HSPs together, there's still communication that needs to happen moment to moment. Even if you're perfectly aligned on your values and everything else, there's
hmm.
still things you
And I
need to
think
talk
that's
through.
also it's like kind of just this like the myth of the one or whatever, that it's like, oh, even with the right
Hmm.
person, like it'll never be hard. And
Right.
um that it doesn't mean it's not meaningful, and it's not
Hmm.
like rewarding, and it's not the right person. Sometimes it's not, but like
Right.
I find if it, um, yeah, I think having more of that, like this fluid kind of like, okay, it's gonna ebb and flow. Like each day we're kind of like tuning into our needs, we're regrounding. Yeah, just kind
Hmm.
of creating some of our own space and yeah,
Yeah.
recognizing that like we still, I mean, I think even I see this like people talk a lot about mom burnout too, which it's
Hmm.
not my specialty, but I definitely when I became a new mom, I definitely felt that, and I think kind of it's some of that of like now my daughter's in daycare and like I feel like I
Right.
have my own time, and there can be sometimes feelings of like guilt or like, oh, I'm exercising, I'm doing this, but then I'm showing up like more filled up for
Yeah.
her. And I think it's similar with
That's
a romantic partner.
hmm Right, filling up yourself so then you have something to bring into the relationship. And also the energy to communicate needs, boundaries, whatever it is, needing space for that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
expectations.
expectations.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like a lot of whether you're dating, whether you're in a relationship, is really supporting yourself and then really getting in touch with what your needs, your values, expectations are. I think these really core pieces.
And I feel like that's also, I think it's like simplifying the stuff that's not so aligned. So whether
Yeah.
it's, extra stuff on your calendar that's kind of like, oh, I'm not, it just feels like I'm drained all the time and I don't have time for a
Mm-hmm.
relationship, or maybe, going out with people that are, it's not aligned. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And needing to be thoughtful about that with your limited energy and bandwidth.
Yeah, and I definitely have seen on your things, at least that you talk about, is kind of like just normalizing it for yourself. Like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is my capacity, and like with that,
Yeah.
what do I want to prioritize? And
Yes.
like how can I? I think sometimes we can feel frustrated, and I
Mm-hmm.
have seen you say that a lot, just like and I like your surveys and you say like, what's your caseload that you're comfortable
Yeah.
with? Like,
Right.
and even the
Right.
comparison that we do to other people, or like,
Sure.
um,
We
yeah,
could ask ourselves the same question with how many dates can you go on a week? So I have some clients that feel like they need to go on 10 dates a week to keep up and give themselves the best chance. I'm like, well, let's take a look. Is that actually sustainable?
yeah,
And
I know it,
yeah,
that scarcity mindset.
yeah,
But
right.
I've had my one friend, the same one now, she when she was dating, but the one I
Hmm.
said about like the husband doesn't really use, like, he doesn't like to be on his phone. He doesn't even
Right.
have a smartphone. Like he doesn't.
Yeah.
But I remember she go out like a lot of dates, but she was like more extroverted and she liked
Hmm.
it. So I think it was like for her. So that's what I'm saying, kind of knowing yourself.
Knowing
But if it's for
yourself.
a
Yeah.
person and it feels like they're still coming in like this, it's kind of like, okay, is this
Hmm.
actually helping?
Right. Because if you're showing up to dates dysregulated, maybe resentful for being there, but you think you should, that's not
Yeah.
going to go well. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
for all this. I mean, it's I think it's a reminder for sensitive folks to honor your needs, even in
Mm.
dating, and a lot of the ways that you're taking care of yourself in your personal life at work can also show up in your relationships. There's a lot of crossover, which I hadn't really put together. And I really appreciate the burnout piece because that's, I think, really important for us to think about. How can we make dating sustainable and
And
fulfilling?
with our relationships, yeah. And I
Yeah,
just kind of,
exactly.
I think also that what you, even though how you were saying just in terms of your own like
Hmm.
career and pivoting, and I think
Yeah,
looking at relationships and dating and our lives as like, it's it's we want to have some structure and direction, but
sure.
kind of knowing that it's going to be a little bit fluid and it will sort of ebb and flow, and kind of having to checking in with ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, what, just as a maybe a final thought, what could checking in with ourselves in dating look like? Is there something that you've done or you share with clients as a way to kind of take a baseline?
So I guess like how you feel on the
Hmm.
date.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like, are you feeling comfortable? Do you feel like conversation's flowing? Are you feeling like heard?
Mm.
Are they listening? And kind of just like, yeah, just giving yourself a little time after, like, to sometimes
Yes.
like, not like, you don't always have to immediately call someone, just letting it settle for a little bit. Or also if it's really feeling uncomfortable, and like to trust
Mm.
that too.
Yes, exactly. Give yourself time to process as an HSP. It might not be apparent in the moment, but also using all the maybe the nonverbal information you're picking up, the emotion, what's happening between the lines, how you feel when you're with that person. There's a lot of information there that you could use. Yeah, I love that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also, like still taking time to do other things that are
Mm-hmm.
fun or enjoyable for yourself, like
Right.
self-care.
Right. Don't throw everything else out to date. Don't lose yourself. Well,
Right.
Rebecca, I just want to thank you so much for this conversation. I feel like you
Yeah,
shared so
thank you
many
so
important
much. It was
nuggets.
so
Absolutely. It was
wonderful.
so fun. So I know I'll be sure to share your website, your Instagram. I know you have a free meditation for folks who are in the dating process. So I'll share all that in the show notes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you
Cool.
so much,
Thank
April.
you.